All right, let's talk about something that can feel so personal and just plain painful in a relationship. I'm talking about that moment when, in the middle of a conflict, your partner just goes completely silent. It's confusing, it's frustrating, so let's get into it and try to figure out what's really going on.
You know the feeling, right? You're in it, maybe you're arguing, and then poof, nothing. The conversation just hits a brick wall, that feeling of connection is gone, and you're just left there, wondering what just happened. If you've been there, you're in the right place. First off, let's just acknowledge that feeling. It's real and it hurts. One minute, you're trying to work through something together, and the next, you're facing this silence that feels, honestly, deafening. It can make you feel so incredibly lost and just completely alone. And when you're on the outside of that wall, it's so easy for your mind to jump to the worst case scenario. You start thinking, they're just being dramatic, or they're doing this to punish me. Maybe the most painful thought of all is they just don't care. I mean, these are powerful, awful feelings. But what if that's not the whole story?
Okay, so let's try something. Let's completely shift our perspective. We're going to go from what it feels like standing on the outside of that wall to what's actually happening on the inside. Because here's the thing, that silence, it's almost never empty. More often than not, it's a sign that there is a massive storm raging on the inside.
The first thing to really get is that this isn't always a conscious choice. It's often a deep biological reaction. You've heard of fight or flight, right? Well, there's a third one, freeze. It's just as real, just as instinctual. When the emotional pain or the stress gets to be too much, the brain basically yanks the emergency brake. It's not a power move, it's a survival move.
And this is fascinating, and it's why just saying, come on, just talk to me, almost never works. When a person is emotionally flooded, the part of their brain that handles language, that finds the words, can literally go quiet. It's not that they're maliciously holding back the words, it's that the words might have become physically impossible to find. They're not shutting you out, they are desperately trying to hold themselves in.
So, what does that internal storm actually feel like? What are the thoughts swirling around in their head? Well, a big one is this: I don't feel safe enough to be honest yet. For a lot of people, they learned a long, long time ago that expressing big feelings just leads to more pain, to being ridiculed or dismissed or blamed. So the instinct isn't to open up, it's to armor up. And here's another thought running through their mind. It's a kind of damage control. The silence isn't always about protecting themselves. Sometimes it's about protecting the relationship from the intensity of what they're feeling. They know that if they open their mouth right then, while they're flooded, something destructive might come out. So in a weird way, silence feels like the most responsible option they have in that moment. And finally, there's this. That stillness you see on the outside, it's hiding a monumental internal effort. They're not just sitting there blankly. They are actively, with all their might, trying to not spiral into shame, trying not to burst into tears, trying not to completely fall apart. That quiet is full of hard work. So here's the bottom line. We are not talking about a character flaw here. We're talking about a survival skill, a skill that was probably learned and perfected in childhood. If every time you tried to express yourself as a kid, it ended badly, you learned really fast to just get quiet. It worked back then. It kept you safe. The problem is that old strategy can cause a lot of new problems in our adult relationships. Okay, so now that we've peeked behind the curtain, let's just go ahead and bust some of the biggest myths about this silence. We're going to do a side-by-side comparison, what it looks like from the outside versus what's really going on inside. This slide right here, this is the core of it. What looks to you like cold is almost always overwhelmed. What feels like punishing is usually a desperate act of being self-protective. What you interpret as indifferent is actually a mind that is completely flooded. And what you see as avoidant is often a person who is deeply processing everything that's happening all at once. So understanding all this is a huge first step. But it's not everything, right? So the real question is, what can you actually do? How can you start to build a bridge across that chasm of silence and create a space that feels safe enough to connect in again? First, let's be really clear about what doesn't work. Pushing for an answer right now, following them around the house, saying things like, you can't just shut me out, or turning into a detective and interrogating them. Look, these reactions come from a place of hurt, I get it, but all they do is crank up the pressure, which just confirms their brain's belief that, yep, this situation is not safe. It actually makes the wall go up even higher. So what do they need instead? It really boils down to two words: emotional steadiness. That means offering your calm, patient presence without demanding that they come out of their shell on your schedule. It's about signaling, hey, I'm okay, I can handle this quiet, we'll be okay. When you do that, it makes the silence feel less and less necessary.
Okay, here are some actual phrases you can use. These aren't magic spells, but they are incredibly powerful tools. Something like, I can tell something hurt you. That shows you see them without demanding they explain. Or, I'm here when you're ready. That offers connection without any pressure. I want to understand, not argue. That just lowers the threat level immediately. And my favorite? You don't have to explain it perfectly. That gives them permission to just be human.
All right, let's talk about the final piece of this puzzle, because this has to be about shared responsibility. It's not a one-way street. Yes, understanding the silence is huge, but the long-term goal is for both of you to find a way to communicate that doesn't need that wall. And that means learning how to tell the difference between taking healthy space and unhealthy avoidance. This table breaks it down really well. See, healthy space has the intention of coming back to fix things. It's about self-regulating so you can re-engage. It's usually communicated, even with just a simple, I need a minute. The goal is repair. Unhealthy avoidance, on the other hand, feels like punishment or escape. It's that total, indefinite silent treatment, and it only creates more distance and resentment.
And this is just so important to remember. Understanding where the silence comes from, the pain, the history, it explains the behavior, but it doesn't excuse it forever. The goal for the relationship can't just be for one person to get better at decoding silence. The goal is for both people to grow, to find new ways to talk about hard things so that building a wall isn't the only tool in the toolbox.
And remember the value in this, because when someone who processes things internally is finally ready to speak, what you're getting isn't a hot-headed, knee-jerk reaction. What you're getting has been thought through, it's been felt through, it's a conclusion, and that's something worth waiting for. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. What if you could reframe this whole thing? What if their silence isn't a locked door? What if it's not a rejection or an ending? What if, instead, it's an invitation? Asking you to find a different kind of key, one made of patience and safety and a real desire to understand the quiet storm inside.